Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I will talk about China Metro. How China built the world's largest metro network. China's urban transit boom is nothing short of astounding. In just a few decades, Chinese cities have collectively built the world's most extensive metro networks, eclipsing century-old systems in Europe and North America. Take Shanghai for example. In the early 1990s it had no subway at all. Today, Shanghai's metro alone spans over 800 kilometers of track, making it one of the largest rapid transit systems on the planet. Even second-tier cities like Chengdu now boast massive networks that rival or exceed those in London or New York. How did China achieve such speed and scale in metro construction, and how do these systems compare with the rest of the world? Let's dive into the stories of Shanghai and Chengdu and see how they stack up against metros in cities like London, New York, Los Angeles, and Toronto. A Shanghai Metro Line 15 train arrives at Guocuan Park Station in 2021. In under 30 years, Shanghai built a metro network of 19 lines with over 800 kilometers of track, becoming one of the world's largest and busiest urban rail systems. Shanghai is a remarkable case of rapid transit development. The city's first metro line opened in 1993, relatively late compared to older world cities. Yet, by 2024, the Shanghai Metro had exploded to 19 lines, 409 stations, and about 808 kilometers of route. To put that in perspective, that's roughly double the track length of the New York City subway. This expansion happened incredibly fast, especially in the 2000s. In the run-up to the 2010 World Expo, Shanghai opened new lines and extensions almost every year between 2003 and 2010. The city continued to add lines through the 2010s and early 2020s, so that it now has a dense web of metro routes reaching nearly every corner of this metropolis. The ridership numbers speak to the metro's importance. Shanghai's subway carries over 10 million passengers each workday on average. In fact, annual ridership hit about 2.8 to 3.9 billion trips in recent years, the highest in the world. On a busy day, upwards of 13 million people ride the Shanghai Metro. To put that in context, Shanghai's metro moves more people daily than the entire population of many cities. It handles about 73% of all public transport trips in Shanghai, showing how central it is to urban life. How did Shanghai build so much so quickly? A big part of the story is strong government planning and investment. Once the city got the green light in the 1980s to develop a subway, it adopted a long-term master plan. Construction ramped up in phases, often with multiple lines built simultaneously. In the late 2000s, huge projects were accelerated to meet the 2010 Expo deadline. The city standardized designs for stations and trains, allowing for mass-produced metro infrastructure. Overall, Shanghai managed to compress into 3 decades what many older cities did in a century. The result is a metro network that is now the longest by route length and one of the most extensive on Earth, completely transforming how people get around China's biggest city. While Shanghai grabs headlines, the metro boom isn't limited to China's most famous metropolises. Consider Chengdu, the capital of Sichuan province, a city sometimes called second tier in China's urban hierarchy. Chengdu opened its first metro line just in 2010, but you wouldn't guess that from looking at its network today. In just 15 years, the Chengdu Metro has grown to 15 lines, 332 stations, and about 664 kilometers of track. Yes, you read that right. A city that had zero rapid transit in 2010 now has a system larger than the London Underground or New York subway in route length. The pace of construction in Chengdu has been blistering. Essentially, Chengdu built an entire large city subway network in a decade and a half. Multiple new lines opened each year during peak construction periods. For example, between 2015 and 2020, Chengdu inaugurated several new lines and extensions annually as part of an aggressive expansion plan. The city's metro map now sprawls in all directions, connecting suburban districts and even serving the airport with high-speed express lines. Residents have gained access to rapid transit at a speed that almost defies the usual slow, incremental growth seen elsewhere. In terms of scale, Chengdu's metro now rivals those of much larger or older global cities. Its 664 kilometers network is not far behind Shanghai's in size, and it even surpassed the track length of systems like New York's and London's. More on those in a moment. The daily ridership in Chengdu is also impressive. The system handles roughly 2.2 billion passenger trips per year, which averages to around 5 to 6 million rides each day. For a city of around 20 million people in the metro area, this high ridership reflects strong demand and successful adoption of the new lines by commuters. Chengdu's achievement highlights how China's metro building spree extends beyond the megacities. National policy changes made it easier for second-tier cities to get approval and funding for subways. In 2016, for instance, China lowered the population threshold for cities to plan metro systems from 3 million to 1.5 million. This enabled a wave of projects in places like Chengdu, Wuhan, and dozens of others. Chengdu took full advantage, constructing lines at a remarkable rate. The result is that even cities many outside China haven't heard of now have urban rail networks that rank among the world's largest. To appreciate China's metro expansion, it helps to compare it with some major global metro systems. Let's look at a few notable examples and see how they stack up in terms of size, speed of growth, cost, and ridership. First of all, London. The Tube in London is the oldest metro system in the world, opened in 1863. Over about 160 years, it has expanded to 11 lines, 272 stations, and 402 kilometers of track. This is a substantial network, but remember, Shanghai reached double that length in just 30 years. London's growth has been steady but slow by modern Chinese standards. The last major addition was the Elizabeth Line, which opened in 2022, after over a decade of construction. Daily ridership on the London Underground is about 3 to 4 million, roughly 1.18 billion trips per year in 2023. London's metro is famous and busy, yet its annual ridership is barely one-third of Shanghai's. It's a testament to how much more capacity Chinese systems have built and attracted in a short time. Secondly, New York City. New York's subway is one of the largest and busiest in the West. It dates back to 1904 and today features 28 services across 424 stations, with about 399 kilometers of routes. For much of the 20th century, NYC was the world's biggest system, but it has been eclipsed by Beijing and Shanghai in recent years. New York's expansion has slowed considerably. The network we see now was largely in place by mid-century. In fact, only two significant extensions have opened in recent decades, the 7-line extension, 2015, and the 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1. Those projects added just a few kilometers and stations at a very high cost. By 2024, New York's annual subway ridership was around 2.04 billion, translating to roughly 5 to 6 million riders on an average weekday. That's huge by Western standards, yet still only about half of Shanghai's daily ridership. New York has an extensive, venerable system, but building even small expansions there tends to take many years and extraordinary funding, as we'll discuss in the cost section. Finally is the Toronto. Toronto's subway is Canada's largest, but compared to China it's quite modest. The first line opened in 1954. As of 2024, Toronto has 4 lines, really 3 heavy rail lines and 1 short metro light, with 70 stations and about 70 kilometers of route. Ridership in 2024 was roughly 331.8 million trips for the year, about 1.1 million on an average weekday. Toronto has been slowly expanding its network. For example, a 5 km extension opened in 2017, and a new 19 km light rail line is nearing completion. But these projects often take a decade from planning to opening. Compared to Chengdu building 600+ km in 15 years, Toronto's pace is extremely slow. The entire Toronto subway carries in a year what Shanghai moves in just over a month. The contrast really underscores how different the scales are. These comparisons highlight a pattern. Legacy systems like London and New York are extensive but grew gradually over a century or more. Car-oriented cities like Los Angeles have struggled to build or attract riders to transit. Meanwhile, Chinese cities have leapfrogged ahead in both physical scale and ridership within a single generation. One of the most striking aspects of China's metro building is speed. Chinese cities compress timelines for planning and construction that would be unheard of elsewhere. For example, between 2009 and 2015, China built 87 new mass transit lines totaling 3,100 kilometers across 25 cities. In just 6 years, China added roughly the equivalent of 7 New York City subways worth of length. Contrast this with a city like New York. From 2005 to 2030, the plans in NYC, including the Second Avenue line and others, will have spent on the order of $35 billion to add just 15 kilometers of new subway tunnel. In the 2010s, New York opened 2 small extensions, which cost an astronomical $1.3 to $1.6 billion per kilometer to build. During the same decade, Paris was able to build metro extensions for about $250 million per kilometer, and cities in Spain and South Korea even less. But Chinese cities managed to build far more route length than anyone else, and generally at costs significantly lower than US levels. In terms of cost efficiency, Chinese metro projects tend to be relatively economical considering their scale. Estimates vary, but most recent Chinese subways cluster below 1 billion yen per kilometer, roughly $150 to $250 million per kilometer in equivalent terms. Even in megacities like Beijing and Shenzhen, costs per kilometer stay in this range, and only in Shanghai do some lines approach 1.5 billion renminbi per kilometer, due to complex tunneling under dense, built-up areas. Compare that to New York's Second Avenue subway, which cost about $4.5 billion for 3 kilometers, over $1.5 billion per kilometer, or the extension of a single station often costing several hundred million per kilometer. By building subways cheaper, Chinese cities get more bang for the buck. A real-world example, New York spent $35 billion for 15 kilometers of new tunnel and some commuter rail improvements, whereas with a similar budget, Chinese cities can build many dozens of kilometers of metro line. Indeed, as noted, 988.6 billion yen was invested to add 3,100 kilometers of urban rail in China from 2009 to 2015, averaging well under $50 million per kilometer. Economies of scale, standardized engineering, and efficient project management all contribute to these lower costs. Another factor is government support and urban planning priorities. The Chinese government made metro construction a pillar of urban policy to curb congestion and pollution. Funding comes from a mix of central and local sources, and because land around new stations often increases in value, cities use land development to help finance projects, a model sometimes called rail plus property. Additionally, state-owned enterprises with significant expertise handle construction, and China has perfected tunnel boring and cut-and-cover techniques by repetitive use. Building multiple lines concurrently in a city also spreads out fixed costs and allows sharing of resources. This is how cities like Chengdu could open, say, for new lines on the same day, which actually happened in December 2020, something unimaginable elsewhere. Crucially, these massive investments have translated into huge capacity and ridership. The ultimate test of a transit system is whether people use it. In China, they certainly do. We saw that Shanghai and Beijing each approach 10+ million daily riders, and even smaller Chengdu is around 5 to 6 million daily. By comparison, the busiest Western systems are in the 5 million range or lower. Los Angeles's rail network carries only 170,000 riders per weekday, pre-COVID. On heavy rail and a few 100,000 including light rail, tiny fractions of comparable Chinese cities. Toronto's subway moves just over 1 million a day and London about 3 million. The difference in scale of ridership is directly tied to the scale of networks. Chinese cities built extensive lines reaching many neighborhoods quickly, so a vast population was able to switch to metro travel. The high ridership in turn justifies the continued expansion. It's a virtuous cycle that many transit agencies elsewhere envy. In a remarkably short span, China has built a metro empire. Shanghai's journey from its first tunnel in the 90s to an 800+ km network today illustrates the ambition and speed at which these projects advanced. Chengdu's story shows that it's not just the biggest financial centers, even inland cities have joined the metro building frenzy and created world-class systems virtually overnight. The world's largest metro network is not just one city, but the combined result of dozens of Chinese cities laying down tracks at record pace. As of 2024, China operates metros in 54 cities with a combined length well over 11,000 kilometers. In fact, 11 of the world's 12 longest urban transit systems are now in China. This is an extraordinary shift in the landscape of urban transport. Comparatively, cities like London and New York will continue to modernize and extend their venerable systems, but likely nothing on the scale of China's expansions. Los Angeles and Toronto are trying to accelerate their transit build-out, yet they remain far behind in mileage. The Chinese approach, characterized by rapid execution, high investment, and integrated planning, has enabled a leap to the front of the pack in metro infrastructure. For a digital avatar narrating this story, the key takeaway is one of awe and scale. Imagine a metro map expanding so fast that it needs to be redrawn every year. That's been the reality in Shanghai, Chengdu, and many other Chinese cities. The trains in these cities have transformed daily life, moving tens of millions of people efficiently across megacities. Of course, such growth wasn't cheap. It required political will and billions of dollars, but by global standards, China got a lot of transit for the money. As a result, China today is home to the largest and some of the most heavily used metro systems on Earth. It's a testament to what can be achieved when urban transit is made a national priority. Whether other countries can replicate this approach remains to be seen, but the story of how China built the world's largest metro network will stand as a milestone in urban engineering and planning for years to come.